Hello, everyone. This is the recorded version of the GitHub Desktop Workshop for Hack McWiCS 2026. And today I'll be showing you how to set up your project for the hackathon, and especially how to work with GitHub Desktop, which is a little bit more intuitive than working with the command line. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to have one person create your project. And the easiest way to do this is directly through GitHub. So once you've created your GitHub account, you're going to go to this new button. You're going to type in your project name. I'm going to call it tutorial GitHub for now, but you can name it whatever you want. You're going to try to keep your repository public, or at least at some point during the hackathon, change the visibility to public. And the reason why is because as judges, we need to be able to see the actual code that you've written. So you'll have to provide a public link to us. We're going to add a README as a description of our project, and we could add a git ignore. I can go over how to actually use this in a second. All right, let's create this repository. So now I have a version of my project living in GitHub. And it's important to mention at this point that a repository which holds your code is going to exist in two different places. This repository is going to exist on GitHub, and it's also going to exist on your own local machine. What's in common between these two is they're both going to use Git, which is the actual version control management software, but there's going to be two copies, right? You're going to have one copy that's living online for everybody to see and everybody to look at, and a version that's going to exist on your own computer. When I create this repository, the first thing I did was, you can see this initial commit here, and a commit is basically a snapshot of your code at some point in time. So you can always go back to your old commits in order to see what that repository looked like at the time that you made that commit. So this is your initial commit. Now, the next step that I want to do is I want to have this repository, which I just created, on my local machine as well. And your teammates also need to have this same repository on their local machines as well. So I'm going to go to settings, and I need to add my teammates as my collaborators. So I'm going to go to collaborators. I'm going to add people, and I'm going to add myself. And you can see that I actually have to accept this invitation. So I'm just going to really quickly change to my account. Okay, so after this short pause, I just went to my email to accept the invitation for my personal account, but you can see that I can now actually push items to the repository. So this just means I have write access. So you want to make sure all your collaborators have write access to this repository. Now, this is the part where I copied my repository to my local machine. And to do that, I'm going to use the GitHub Desktop app, but I'm going to explain what's actually going on behind the scenes. So if I go here to my GitHub Desktop app, I logged in using my personal account. I'm going to click on, um, sorry, let me just clone the repository first, or get the URL, sorry. I'm going to go to code. I'm going to go to HTTPS. I'm going to copy the URL to my clipboard. And I'm going to go to my GitHub Desktop app. I'm going to click Add, clone repository, and copy paste the URL there. Okay, so I just want to point out that I created my repository in the default directory. So if I go to Show and Explore, you can see that it's placed in my this path, so in Documents, GitHub, and in this actual file here. But you can actually put the repository wherever you want. For the sake of the tutorial, I will just keep it here. But you can always change the path, so you can put the local repository in whatever folder you want. And now what's happened here is I've done what's called a git clone, and that has created a copy of the repository on my computer. And it will have the exact same initial commit and all of the history from the repository which was living on GitHub. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to create a branch. It's best practice not to create new changes on the main branch because the main branch is supposed to represent the working, clean, polished version of the code. So even with a hackathon, sometimes it's nice to create branches. and when you're working with Git and you're in other projects as well. So I'm going to go to my app here, and I'm going to click Open in Visual Studio Code to open my IDE. You can use whatever IDE you want by changing it here, but I'm going to use VS Code. So now that I've opened this here, I am still right now on the main branch. I don't want to stay on the main branch. I want to create my own branch to make my own changes without affecting the actual code in main. So I'm going to go to current branch, click new branch, and call it new changes. And this is going to create a branch for me to work on. So basically, I've done two things here. The first thing that I've done is a git branch. Let me just write this command here. Git. Sorry. Git branch. And I created the branch which I called Emily/new changes. And I've also switched to this branch. So what we call checking out a branch. And now that I'm on this branch, I'm free to make whatever changes I want to. And so, sorry, not this one. That was a different tutorial. I'm going to go to the README and I'm going to say, let's make some new changes. So there's two steps for when you want to actually save your changes. The first thing that happens behind the scenes is a git add. So a git add just means that you take whatever changes you made when you were writing up your files and you add it to what we call a new commit, right? I'm going to kind of start creating a new commit here, but it hasn't actually been fully created yet. I'm just making some changes and you can see that they're appearing here. When I click this option, commit one file, I'm in fact running two commands. I'm running the git add command to add my files to this commit that I'm creating. And I'm also going to run a second command, which is going to be git commit. And that is basically going to create this new bubble, this new snapshot representing the changes that I just made to this branch. So now I have this here, and I called it update. And I can continue to add more commits. I can continue to make more snapshots, more updated versions of the code on my branch. I can go back here and make some more changes. More changes. And if I go back to the GitHub desktop app, I can see I have the option to commit these changes as well. I'm going to press commit. And I've done the exact same thing. So I've git added, I've git committed, and I've created a second commit here. I can always also change the messages. So for example, I'm going to write some more changes. I'm going to get to GitHub desktop here and I can update this here. So I'm going to write third commit here, and that's my commit message. So this is my third commit. And now let's just say that I'm ready to actually merge these changes into the main branch. And so I'm actually going to do this in two steps. The first thing I want to do is I want to move these changes back to the remote branch so that the remote branch also has this newly created branch I have here. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to GitHub Desktop and I'm going to press Publish Branch. And that will create the branch there. I can also continue to add more changes, by the way, after I've created this branch. So I can say like a new change after creating branch. I can go back to GitHub Desktop, add another commit, because why not? But what's happened here when I created that branch, or sorry, when I ran that publish branch command, is I've pushed my changes to the remote repository. So the exact same history which I was creating in my own local machine is now inside of GitHub as well. And that's what happened, the git push command. Now, the second thing I want to do is I want to merge my changes, which means take all of this history and put it into the main branch, put all the changes I made into the main branch. And I'm going to do this with a git merge. However, when you're merging changes into the main branch, it's always good practice to open a pull request instead of just doing it willy-nilly, right? You can do this from the GitHub interface. You can also do it from GitHub Desktop. So I'm going to push the changes that I had literally just made, and it should give me the option to create a pull request. So I'm going to create a pull request. I'm going to say, here's some new changes, and I'm going to create this pull request. Now, I'm going to refresh this. I'm actually going to change accounts just to demonstrate something really quickly, which is going to be a code review. So a code review just makes it possible for somebody else to systematically review the changes that you've made. And to do that, you can add someone as a reviewer. I'm adding myself here. You can go to Files Change. You can see a review has been requested. I can submit a review. I can say, yes, looks good to me. And I can submit this review, say everything looks good. And then I can merge it. The other thing you might want to do is, for example, if I am another collaborator and I want to switch to this branch in order to actually check it out and see what changes have been made, if I go to my GitHub desktop app here, there is this option to actually switch branches. So I can switch back to main. And if I do that and go here, you can see that I don't see the changes I had made because I'm on that. Those were changes that were applied on a different branch, right? If I go back to here, the main branch is still over here, and it doesn't see all of these changes which happened on a different branch. But you can always switch between branches, and you can even check out the branches that your teammates have made, and that just allows you to preview the changes before you actually put them into the main code base. So I've reviewed these changes, or my teammate has, and everything looks good. Now I'm ready to merge. Once I click Confirm Merge, what's going to happen is that all of these changes are going to become part of the main branch. So this is a git merge. And if I go to the code on this side, you can see that the changes that I made are now in the main code base. Now the final step, and you should always do this when you're working collaboratively, is I need to pull the changes which were happening in the GitHub side of things into my local machine. And to do that, we're going to do a git pull, or a git fetch, if you will, which is going to fetch all of the new branches, new changes, and all of the local commits which happened within those branches into my local repository. Let me just expand this line down here, and I'm going to go back here to fetch origin, the origin being the remote repository, pull from origin. Takes a while. There we go. So now if I go here, I am currently on the main branch, right? I can see here I'm on the main branch, but I can see that my changes are correctly reflected in the main branch. So when I did this fetch command, I pulled this git merge into my own local repository. And this is basically your workflow, right? So every single person, when you want to make a new change, you're going to do git branch. You're going to create a new branch. You're going to add some new commits with the changes you want to make. They're going to push it to your remote repository. You're going to open a pull request, and you or somebody else will merge those into the main branch. Okay, just some tips for working with Git. Number one is people work on different pieces. So when you're working with Git, it's always a good idea, or just collaboratively, it's just a good idea to make sure that everybody is not touching each other's code. You want to delegate such that you're not always overwriting each other. Otherwise, you're going to run into what we call merge conflicts. And number two is to create commits as you go. So it's always good to save your work to back it up by creating these commits. And third is to keep updated with the changes which are happening in the remote repository. So you should always, always, always be fetching from the remote repository so you're up to date with the changes that your teammates have made. With that, that is a overview of how to work with Git and GitHub, how to set up your project, how to start working, and the general sort of standard workflow that people use when they work with Git, GitHub and GitHub Desktop. Okay, this is just a short note on a git ignore file, why you might use one, and how it works. So let's just say that you are accessing a web API, and when you create an account, the web API gives you what's called a secret key. And that's a method of identifying you. And let's just say you can't go over 100 requests per day, for example. So if you accidentally push this key to your repository, then somebody will be able to access that key and start using your API key to make requests. And then you're going to wake up, you're going to go check your credit card balance, and you will find that you accidentally spent a lot of money. So it's very important that you don't leak out secrets. But there's other reasons why you might not want to push all your files to the remote repository. And that can include maybe there's some executables, which, you know, don't need to be pushed because you're compiling on your own machine, or some test files or some build artifacts that just should not be living in the remote repository. So in order to deal with these issues, there is something called a git ignore file. It's always titled .git ignore, like so. And it just allows you to add files that should not be pushed to the remote repository. So here I've added my .env file, but I can also add entire folders. So let me just put a folder. I'm going to call it, let's say build. You know, I have a bunch of build files in here, and I don't want to push these to main. I want to make sure that they only exist on my own machine. I'm going to write build and then this slash symbol here. And now neither of these files will be pushed when I actually push my changes to main. So I'm just going to quickly change branches. And just bring my changes over. And you can see, right? Like I had all these changes that I made, all these new files I created, but none of them are showing up in my changes here. And so I'm going to write create.gitignore. And when I create this commit and I publish my changes and I push it to the remote repository, you can see that the only changes which have actually been pushed do not include those files I was ignoring. So always good practice to have a .gitignore file.